Folks, welcome to Academic Spotlight, the Natural Science and Mathematics. We're really excited to just dive into the nitty gritty, any questions that you guys have. So very briefly, I'll introduce myself and my colleague, Joey Seltzer, who works in the Office of Admission with me, and then I'll kick it, most importantly, to our panelists, all of our experts here. So my name is Caroline Berlin. I'm an Assistant Dean of Admission, and my role here today is just to kick us off, ask us a few intro questions, and just keep things moving. And Joey will be working a little more and more in the Q&A and chat if you want to introduce yourself and your role, Joey.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Joey Seltzer, Senior Associate Dean in the Admission Office and also a Bates grad, 2003, but I was a history major, so I also have a lot to learn tonight. I'm very excited to be here. My role, as Caroline said, will be behind the scenes answering the Q&A and the chat, so use those functions at the bottom of the Zoom at any point during our conversation. I'll feed those to our panelists and maybe answer some of those with links and videos, etc. So be active in the chat and I'll see you there.
Thank you, Joey. So without further ado, I will kick introductions to our panelists, and I'll just kind of go in order that I see you in the Zoom. I apologize if that isn't the same for everyone, but I'd love to hear your name and what you teach, and maybe how long you've been at Bates, if that would be interesting. So I'll kick it to Geneva first, and please correct me if my pronunciation is wrong.
Hi, my name is Geneva Laurita, and I'm in chemistry and biochemistry, and I typically teach our intro chemistry courses and inorganic chemistry. And this is my, I guess we're ending my 4th year here. So I've been here for a little while now.
Excellent. And I'll kick it to April.
Hi, I'm April Hill. I'm in the biology department. I teach at both the introductory level and at the more advanced level. I teach things like genetics and developmental biology and molecular biology. This is I'm a longtime faculty member, but it's my 3rd year at Bates.
Thank you. Anelise.
Hi, I'm Anelise Shrout. I am in the Digital and Computational Studies program. I am also, like Joey, my PhD is in history, so I teach sort of interdisciplinarily around computation, introduction to programming, but also sort of data science in a liberal arts context.
Excellent. Nathan?
Hi, I'm Nathan Lundblad. I'm in the Department of Physics and Astronomy. I've been at Bates about a decade, a little more than that. My specialty in terms of physics interests are low temperature physics, studying matter really close to absolute zero, what happens when you get things really cold. And I've been teaching courses like our laboratory physics courses, our junior senior lab courses, electronics, quantum mechanics, kind of all the things that kind of across the physics major there. I'd be happy to answer any questions in that vein.
Excellent. Colleen?
Hi, I'm Colleen O'Loughlin. I am in the chemistry and biochemistry department. I've been at Bates, this is my 3rd year. I also teach in our introductory chemistry course, and I'm a biochemist by training. And so I teach upper levels in biochemistry and clinical trials and drug design.
Awesome. And last but not least, Meredith.
Hi, nice to be here. I'm Meredith Greer. I'm appointed in the math department, and right now I'm also chairing digital and computational studies, which is a lot of fun. And let's see, so I've been at Bates a while now. Next year will be my 20th year, getting close to that. And in math, I teach kind of at all levels. So it could be anything from kind of like an intro calculus course to upper levels, and my research is focused on math modeling, so epidemiology and ecology mostly, and I do have some classes that talk about those topics too.
Excellent. Well, we have a full breadth of specialties here, so I'm really excited. Hopefully we can answer all of your questions. I see we already have one, so thank you so much, Lillian. So yeah, absolutely your questions. We really want them to drive this session, so please don't be nervous at all. Use the chat, use the Q&A. We're excited to answer your questions, but maybe just to kind of get us started, Bates, one of the many strengths it boasts is this really intimate learning community. Specifically, we have this 10-to-1 student to faculty ratio, and your faculty members are a big part of your academic experience at Bates. So we're just really thrilled to share with you. So to get some kind of ground, just like what are science and math classes like at Bates? We'll kind of get into the virtual question in a second, but if you could just lay out for us, I mean, we have a question right now already about intro level classes, but how do you structure typically your classes? What are the size? And how do you get to know your students? And for any question I ask, we don't need to go entirely round robin. If everyone wants to answer my questions, that's totally great, but no need. If you feel like what's been said kind of covers everything, but I'll leave it to you to kind of unmute and go however you want. But yeah, tell us about how you structure your class kind of in a typical year.
So I guess I can speak to general chemistry because I also see there's an intro level class question. So that usually is 45 students and we split that over 4 sections. Colleen, is that right? Is it?
Each section's between like around
45, yeah. So we have 44 sections of 45 students. And we typically teach those, we like to keep the 4 sections kind of on the same page and we meet and talk about that. And we tend to use a combination of different group activities and we do like a little lecture, but we recently installed some whiteboards in the classrooms that we teach in. So we try to do a lot of active, get you up at the boards, working together in your groups. And so I think that that's probably a pretty common thread is that we try to do a lot of active learning and wandering around the groups. And for me, that's when I tend to get to know the students the most. It's just walking around while they're doing group work and just interacting with these smaller groups.
Yeah, I think just to kind of tag in on the chemistry side of things, I think that both Geneva and I teach typically the the first semester of intro chem. We do a lot of coordination. I think for both of us, our big approach is you're going to see a lot of types of problems. How do we develop problem solving skills? And so, it might be a problem you've never thought about before, but like there's probably an approach to solving that problem. So like, how do you kind of go through that systematic approach? And I think that the group work, having groups of like 3 to 5 students, it does give us a chance to like talk to everybody during a typical class and get to know them. And additionally, in addition to the lecture portion, there's also a lab portion and we also teach the labs. So we also, labs are a little bit tinier. And so we get more time to talk to students while they're actually doing experiments in the lab as well.
I can jump in very quickly and just sort of echo a thing that Colleen said, which is that in our intro to computer science and programming class, we don't think about like, you must memorize this syntax or it will be terrible, but rather, how do we solve problems using computers? And like, what are some methods that we can dive into to do that? Which I think is really fun. And then you get to think about how you can solve other problems using these methodologies. But yeah, I think the problem-based approach seems to be fairly common.
I'll jump in from the biology side of things because I see Lillian, you have a question that says, how soon can undergrads start participating with research? And so I'll just say that in biology, our first course is actually a research course. And so students, the classes are our very first class is small. It's about 16 to maybe 20-ish students. And the class is centered on a research question or problem. And so you learn a lot of biology and biology skills by answering, working through an authentic research question. And then after that, some of our other intro courses are a bit bigger. And they're a lot like the courses, I think that Colleen and Geneva and Anelise were describing, a lot of active learning and a lot of opportunities for problem solving. We love to do case studies in biology. So you might get, cases. I think they do in chemistry too. And so, but you can expect to be really participating in all of your classes. You really aren't going to spend very much time listening to a lecture. I would say the most anyone in our intro courses in my department would be like a 10 to 15 minute mini lecture followed by like, let's work some problems, let's study a case, things like that.
I would add that in physics, the way the curriculum at the intro level structured, at least what we're doing it, in recent years is there's about a 20 to 15 student course that's introductory physics for physical science majors. That's got 1, sometimes 2 faculty associated with it. And again, the faculty doing the lab sections associated with that. There's a separate course for the life science majors. So a lot of life science majors take a year of physics as part of pre-medical training and the like. And we recently redid that course. It actually aimed specifically all the examples and kind of the structure of the course aimed at life science examples and the life science interests there. That's been a real change for us, but it actually, I've learned a lot about how you apply physics in the life sciences context. And I think it's worked out well for the students too, because they actually see how physics, kind of applies to where they're going in the pre-med pathway, the life sciences pathway. That's one of the things we've been excited about recently. At the sophomore, junior level, we end up with kind of 10, 15 student lab courses like electronics, sort of studio style courses where students are kind of gathered in a room around 5 or 6 tables with some apparatus on it, figuring out what to do with it. And then at the junior senior level, we end up with some theoretically intensive courses like quantum mechanics or advanced mechanics, things like that, where students focus a little more intensely on the problem solving at the junior senior physics level. So we ended up getting to know physics students from the exploratory, thinking about majoring in another science, thinking about majoring in humanity, but knowing some physics along the way, to the far end of junior senior physics majors who are involved in our research labs, who are involved in summer research, who are involved in various clubs associated with the sciences. So it's kind of all over the map in terms of things going on.
I will jump in on this one since I think these intro courses students take in all these different disciplines. So in math, our intro courses are like the ones that students are most likely to take in their first year, are typically about 25 to 30 students. We have a few different pathways. So sort of starter courses are maybe calculus 1 or 2, maybe linear algebra. Some students start beyond that. And we have different ways that you don't necessarily need to go in exactly the same order. People can choose different orders depending on what it is that they want to study next. And we have a big focus on active learning, and that's something we've actually really tried to ramp up across the full department in recent years, although many of us have done this for quite a while. But similar to what April described, there might be some really short lectures, but a lot of it is let's work on things. Let's get in groups, let's discuss together. And actually both the folks in chemistry, probably everybody sort of talked about this, that there's a lot of students working in groups, presenting to each other, us walking around and talking with the students. And I would add that one thing that math does a lot of is that students who have already taken those courses typically join them as an attached tutor. So there will be someone who tutors specifically for that course, and that's your tutor for that course. And they come to class usually about once a week. So you see them regularly. There are other people also you can go to for tutoring that a lot of people go just to kind of check in. Hey, I'm trying some homework. Can I confirm I'm doing it correctly? Or can I sit together with some friends while I'm doing my homework and we can talk whenever we have questions? And another thing that does for us is we get to know our students in the ways my colleagues have described. We walk around while they're doing group work and they're presenting. We're getting to know them in the class. And then we see some of those students again when they come back and they're the attached tutor, and we kind of get to know them throughout their time at Bates in these ways, as well as taking classes with us, but often they're working with us. And that's really fantastic. It's really great to have an attached tutor who took that class with you, often maybe just a year ago, and now they're the one helping everybody else.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So hopefully you folks are getting a sense that some intro classes are larger. I think like the intro chem, for example, we've heard up to 45. Some of the classes, intro physics, more close to 25. The average class size at Bates is 20. So as you can imagine, as you kind of maybe go up in specificity in a department, you tend to get these smaller intimate classes. I will also add a question we get a lot with not only size of intro classes is how easy is it to get into these intro classes? Is it going to be impossible to get into biology? And I'll say, I know our academic affairs council, our faculty meet 3 years in advance to make sure that they have enough intro classes to get everyone registered, but do any of you guys have additional thoughts about registration, getting students involved in STEM? Is there a huge hurdle? How do you go about meeting demand?
I was going to say for chemistry, because chemistry is required, the intro sequence is required for so many of the STEM majors. We work really closely with the first year seminar advisors. Any student who wants to take chemistry, we will over enroll the sections and make sure that you've got a seat in that classroom. We will make sure it works. The reason that the intro chem classes end up floating up to like 45, all that is because we will take any first year student who is any student, whether a first year or not, that wants to get into chemistry, we'll get them a seat in that class. Every year, Geneva and I have taught intro chem. We work with all the first year seminar advisors. We email and we're like, can you just check and make sure, ask every single student in your seminar and confirm that like they're in chemistry if they think they want to study STEM or not. At least for that, I think that across the board, faculty are really flexible. And if you want to get into a class at Bates, faculty will do what they can to make that work. Clearly, some classes are limited, especially lab-based ones. We can't put students into labs where spaces don't exist. But if like there's a way to do it, I think that's true for our department, and I think every other department. We work really hard to make sure students get access to the courses that they need, especially courses that are prereqs for later courses, to make sure you're not like a year behind, or that you don't feel this pressure that like I didn't get started when I needed to. Even though like, even if you don't start the chem major or the biochem major till your sophomore year, you'll be fine. You can finish the major even if you don't start till then.
Excellent, thank you. And that actually leads me to another question about majoring in time. I think a lot of us, especially me going into college, I had this perception that like STEM, it is rigorous. Everything at Bates is rigorous. But you're like, oh, am I gonna be able to do it in 4 years? Am I gonna be able to double major or have a minor in dance? How do students fit everything in? I know most majors at Bates are around 13 classes. You have 8 semesters, so you're not having to take 4 semesters of chemistry, 4 classes of chemistry every semester. But do you notice that students are easily able to fit the major into 4 years, double majors, even if they start late?
I would say definitely yes for math. Again, we try to have different pathways through, which also helps with the last question about getting into classes, that sometimes it might not be quite the one you planned on, but it's another one on your pathway. And so maybe you can just shift the order. So there are some, we've tried to make it flexible, because if it's not just a matter of classes filling up, but sometimes there's a conflict with another course you need. So we're trying to provide different ways that students can get through and get their courses. Oh, now I was thinking about that and I got pulled back a little bit. So completing everything, a large percentage of math majors seem to be double majors, so they're figuring it out. I would say that, and we've definitely had people sort of decide later, and some of them start not having taken a lot of math. Maybe they haven't taken calculus, or they didn't think they liked it. And then for whatever reason, they take a class, or they talk to a friend and then they take a class. And there are ways that they can get through and get the minor or the major if they decide that a little bit later.
I'd add to that about half of our physics majors are physics and math double majors. And I would say that they're a little bit more stressed than the average bear about what they're doing, but it actually is not, doesn't seem to be a super heavy burden. In fact, the courses they're taking for the math major actually inform some of the stuff they're doing in the physics classes, and they bring things to their those classes that wouldn't have been there otherwise. In the last semester, I was teaching a solid state physics course, and half of the students were in a differential equations course as part of their math double major. And they would, whenever I showed anything that remotely resembled a differential equation, they're like, hey, I've seen that before. And can we do this? Can we do that? And it was things I hadn't even thought of for purposes of that course. So the double majors add a lot. I think they get through it reasonably, maybe not stress-free, but it's certainly not a crushing burden. I think most double majors, there's probably one semester that's a little rough, but they kind of look back at that as a semester where things really started to come together and they started to see the bigger picture about both their studies.
Excellent. And thank you folks so much for continuing to ask your questions. I promise we will get to them in a second. I'm just continuing to ask some general questions before we get into the niche. So thank you for your patience. Yeah, so we've talked a lot about class structure thus far. Out of curiosity, how has virtual learning changed that? I imagine it changes a lot of your class structure and style. What's it been like this year?
I would say Bates students have super come through. And as faculty, we try to do that too, but they've been very flexible. They've been willing to try different approaches to learning, including through remote means when necessary. My classes have tended to have an in-person component or be almost entirely in person, but some days we've had to be remote for various reasons. And some classes have been mixed. So some days we were remote, like through Zoom, and some days we've been in person. And in terms of changing, I mean, so we're using technological tools more as a way to communicate. And some of that is in ways that I think might stick around because they provide different opportunities. So I have students sharing what they're doing through shared documents. And what's great is that other students can kind of look through and say like, oh, there's a different way to explain the same question. And that's a really nice way to explain the work. Or, oh, this person drew a really great graph to demonstrate. And I just I did some algebra, but it's really nice to see this visually. So they can see what everybody else is doing. And it's been really, that part's been really fantastic. And just in terms of what we're doing differently besides, I would say I'm actually like several people in math have been really thinking about how to do assessments that aren't sort of now you come in and take your timed exam, but what are other ways we can assess learning? And some students have really responded super well to that and said, this is great. I can just take the time I need. I can focus on learning math and not worried about the exam and getting all stressed out. And so those are things that we're really trying to think about how we incorporate that moving forward in a bigger way.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad it's been an opportunity to reassess and kind of improve. And to clarify for folks in the Zoom, if you haven't heard already, Bates this past year was kind of both in person and virtual. Students had the opportunity to choose what felt best for them. This upcoming semester, we're looking to be a more traditional in-person experience. Maybe Joey can share the link of our opening plans in case anyone has any questions, but given the unique year it was, I figured we should talk a little bit about virtual learning. Awesome, well, thank you for answering all these questions so far. Let's dive into some student questions. We touched on it a bit already, but it's a hot question. Research. How do students even get involved? I know some students are like really eager and they come in day one and they email all the professors and that's great, but some students are a little more shy. How is it best for students to get involved in research?
So I tend to talk about my research pretty openly in any class that I'm in, and I encourage students to talk to me if it's something that they're interested in. And the way that I usually like to do it is have students, because I haven't had it this much, but I usually have group meetings with my students in my group. And so I invite whoever would like to come to group meetings and see if the research is something that is interesting for you. And I have always, every summer I've been here so far, I've had summer research students. And so there are a lot of summer research opportunities. And also just providing support for maybe off-campus research, so other types of research, RU or other research programs at other institutions that you might be interested in as well. And then I usually have a couple students doing independent studies during the semester, which is when they're doing an independent research project that I'm kind of guiding them from. And so it usually starts out, and I think I saw a question pop up for me. I don't mind first years, absolutely, come talk to me. But it usually starts out kind of staging, like, come to my group meeting, see if it's a good fit, if it's something that you'd like to do, and then maybe doing a little shadowing in the lab of people who are working there. And then if it's a really nice fit, then moving into thinking about something like an independent study or summer research project.
This time of year right now is actually when I think others are settling up on their summer research plans. So I've been interviewing students that have expressed interest in me, either hearing about my research from other people in the department or from me in my classes. and they're all looking at what they want to do over the summer, and they've heard around the way that they can do summer research at Bates. And from what I've heard the students tell me is that they're essentially just talking with faculty that they've done research on the website, or they've heard interesting things about from their classes, or they have a personal connection with from a previous class they've taken. So there's during a regular summer that's non-COVID, there's a squad of students. I think they fill up about 1 dorm's worth on campus doing summer research. It's a neat experience. It's about 8 or 9 weeks typically during the summer, and that's how a lot of the faculty in STEM involve students in their research, although independent studies and thesis are also a pretty key part of that as well.
I think I might be anomalous in this, but I want to sort of jump on something that April said earlier, which is that there are also a lot of research opportunities that take place in the context of a class. And so I teach sort of data analysis, introduction to programming in our class, where we are actually undertaking research that looks into the deep data history of the college. So we collect data, we analyze it, we report it out. The next class picks up where the previous class left off. And so we're building sort of this living, growing data set. And I have presented on it with sort of student credited co-authors, and I'm really excited to see students start to present on it. It's been a weird year for conferences.
I just want to also restate that there is no like limit on how many years into being at Bates you've got to go before you get to do research or anything like that. The best thing you can do is, if research is something you're interested in or anything like that, talk to faculty. Talk to faculty early and often. Faculty love talking about their research. It's actually a huge, like, we all spent our PhDs doing research. And so it's something that's really exciting and interesting for us. I think that, in class, I talk about my research. I talk about the research my colleagues are doing when it connects to class topics. And so if you're interested or think you are, just email and ask people to talk to you. This upcoming summer, I have multiple students who were in my Chem 107 class, either this year or in previous years, that are going to stay and do 8 weeks of summer research. And so there's no timeline for that. Start asking early and often.
And if I could just add, in addition, so I agree with everything that's been said. I also have research students in the summer and some also during the academic year. But we also have a wonderful Center for Purposeful Work at Bates. And a lot of our students apply for summer research positions in, so some of our biomedically interested students have positions this summer at places like the Mayo and MIT's Broad Institute. And so we also help students get placement into other research programs for summer research. So that's just another avenue that you have open to you.
One more thing that I just remembered is that there's internal funding at Bates to basically pay summer salary of students who are participating in external programs elsewhere that either wouldn't be able to take them unless they brought money with them, or would have been unpaid internships otherwise. And it's particularly fantastic in at least the example that I know of. There's a suite of physics internships out there that will pay US citizens, but they don't have money to pay foreign nationals, and Bates will just cover that if they apply through the program on the Bates side, which really helps expand the research experiences that people have access to.
Absolutely, funding is key. Bates is really proud to share that we have almost $1 million in funding every summer for different student internship research job opportunities, knowing, as our folks have said, a lot of things aren't paid these days, and we want you to be able to go do research at Bates or New York, San Francisco, whatever, and not live off ramen for 3 months. So the funding is very important. And I think Joey shared a link on purposeful work internships. Excellent. So we're talking a lot about research. I think maybe the natural conclusion to this is to talk a little bit about the senior thesis, which is pretty unique to Bates. We're one of the few schools left in the country that requires each graduating student to complete a thesis or capstone project in their major. So everyone does a research project essentially at Bates, and they do one that's unique to them. It's a subject that they're really excited about. It's a format that works best for them. But that's enough from me speaking. I'd love to hear from our faculty. Since you directly advise students going through their research project, can you tell us a bit about what the thesis journey looks like and how you go about advising students, I guess, just maybe finding their passions?
I guess I could start there. It's the season of the year at Bates when the juniors are reaching out to physics faculty to figure out what they might be interested in for thesis projects, and then the faculty is figuring out, how to match these up with research interests of the faculty and also what we're interested in supporting. Speaking personally, I would say probably 2/3 of the thesis students I've advised have done projects within my lab, and then 1/3 sort of peripheral to the lab where they're like, well, I'm not super into experimental atomic physics, but you work a lot with lasers and I want to build this laser project that I learned about in my junior lab course, and it seems like you're the guy to advise that, and we can work with that. And sometimes you see projects like that build up organically from the students' coursework and their summer experiences, as opposed to just joining a faculty member's lab. On that lab side, students oftentimes build toward a thesis through summer work in my lab, where they basically spend a summer learning how to run things in my lab, where the wrenches are, what the simulation codes are. And then once they start in the fall for their senior thesis, they just hit the ground running. And by the time they've graduated, they're really just core members of the lab that I am very sad to see go, but they apparently have to graduate. So there's a wide array of thesis opportunities, at least as I see it, that I interact with, but they all involve students near the end of their junior year beginning to think about how can I take all these courses I've taken and direct them into pushing my own limits beyond answers that my faculty members can give me. And if the students come to me and say, hey, what am I supposed to get for this experiment? Like, I don't know, you do it, see what happens. And that's a really interesting transition to supervise and to see students going through and to help facilitate along the way.
I would echo a lot of that, that we do have a broad variety of different types of thesis. And a lot of times it's not so much, I'm advising you and telling you what to do, but we're kind of exploring this topic together. And it's kind of like I have maybe a little more experience in this area, so I'm guiding you, but we're definitely collaborating as we go through these types of projects. And so I have had students also who, continue their summer research or, maybe had picked up an independent study, but it's also not, a requirement that you have to do thesis in someone's lab, or sorry, that you have to do previous research in someone's lab to do thesis or that kind of thing. And so, it's also really cool if you have a student who maybe has done research in another area and then they can bring that into your lab and provide these new sorts of avenues. So it's a really fun, for me, it's a really fun learning experience as well to get some new ideas.
There's actually there's a student who I had in class this past module in solid state physics who's going to be working for Professor Laurita over the summer and then doing thesis with me. And I'm just super excited about what he's going to do.
So exciting.
Yeah, I think I'll like echo very similar things. I also, when students end up assigned to my lab for thesis, one of the big things that I sit down and have a conversation with them about is, right, okay, we're gonna work on the science, we're gonna do this project, right? We're definitely, the way Dr. Laurita described it, as we're collaborating on this. I don't know what the data are going to look like or anything like that. And for me, there's also a piece of this idea of, okay, when you leave Bates and you apply for that next job, right? The next position, grad school, whatever it's going to be, med school. What are the things that you want to say about yourself in a cover letter or in your personal statement? What are the skills that you want to have developed over this year, to be able to talk about? And that's actually a really helpful way of picking projects. Because if somebody wants to tell me oh, I want to be able to say I analyzed huge data sets and I looked at genomes, we're going to pick a really different project than the person who's I want to say that I figured out how to design molecules and like test them as drugs. That's a really different thing. And so for me, thesis is all about how do we take like all these courses that you've taken, all of this problem solving that you've learned, and how do we carve out a project that's going to give you tangible skills and experience that you're going to write about, because the goal is not to like finish a thesis at Bates. The goal is to get you ready for like the thing that's coming next. And so for me, like thesis is a tool that we use to develop those tangible skills. It's not about the product you're going to put together. I mean, like that's an important aspect of it, but it's really about transitioning you from somebody who can walk in and say, what do I do, to someone that can say, this is a problem, how do I go about solving it, with some real applicable skills. And so for me, that's the really cool part of thesis, of getting to like say, like, I want to develop this skill X, and helping students figure out how we go from point A to point B where they have skill X, because that's kind of the thing you're going to do for the rest of your life, is say, I really want to be good at this, and then figure out a way to get good at that. And so I kind of view thesis as like, it's just a really nice way to like, in a kind of like constrained environment, start doing that practice of how do I identify the thing that I want? And then how do I figure out how to get myself from where I currently am to where I need to be to achieve that thing that I want?
I can take a little bit of a stab at a question in the chat, which is related, which is about the community engaged learning and thesis at Bates. So I want to defer to my colleagues here who have a little bit more experience than I do, but my sense is that whereas one might look at community engaged learning and STEM and say these absolutely cannot overlap, I've just been so amazed by how brilliantly my colleagues bring CEL to bear on STEM and STEM to bear on CEL. So I know in environmental studies, the senior theses require community engaged learning. And so students go out and do research in the community that is based in environmental science methodologies and then report back. And I know that several of my colleagues in chemistry and biochemistry have some very cool projects about like cheese and beer. GCS does not yet have a major, so I don't tend to advise theses, but I teach a class where students collaborate with community partners to solve problems at the intersection of gender and technology, which in some cases involves a lot of data science research, but also involves like building like the scaffolding for an app or something like that. So I think it's really connected at Bates everywhere, which is just really exciting.
Excellent. Thank you, Anelise. You actually stole my next question, which was going to be about community engaged learning. And I was curious if anyone else wanted to add on that topic. That's another thing that's not unique to Bates, but I think Bates really excels at is community engaged learning. We're considered a national leader in it. Every year, there's over 60 classes that we offer where students take the theory they're learning in the classroom and go apply it to the real world. So right, where you're making beer and bread, which sounds really exciting and I want to take that class, or whether you are taking an intro politics class and getting assigned to different like grassroots campaigns, there's a lot of opportunity to, yes, exactly, apply this learning to the real world. So I don't know if folks had other thoughts about community engaged learning they wanted to add.
I'll give an example of one in biology right now. We are, for one of our second year courses, we partnered with the Bigelow Labs. They're an algal research lab. They're actually a national algal research lab in Maine. And then the Wolf Neck Dairy Farm. And we're partnered in a study where the idea is to see if algal supplements fed to cows will reduce their methane production in the environment, which you may know that methane is a really unfortunate gas in some cases because it leads to problems around climate change. And so what our students are actually doing is they go to Wolf Neck and they actually get cow feces and they bring it back and isolate DNA, and they're sequencing microbiomes from cows and producing primary data that we actually share with the scientists who are funded at the, through a very large grant to study this question in the state of Maine. And so our students are truly research partners. So this is a research experience, but it's also a community engaged work focusing on the state of Maine and an issue in the state.
Absolutely, that's excellent.
Can I just chime in, April? So Nicole Price, who's one of the researchers, her sister was a Bates grad. So I'm so excited and obsessed with that project. I want to talk to you more about that. Okay.
We're all about community building here. And actually, maybe Professor Hill, while I have you, we did have a question about the STEM Scholars Program. And I believe you've been formational in that. So would you like to just give us a little explanation about how it works, what it is?
Sure. The STEM Scholars, it's a cohort-based community where if you're a student who are, you're either first generation in your family to attend college, or you're from rural Maine, or you're Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, we have a program where we invite you to apply, and we associated with your first year seminar course, we teach a couple of first year seminars, and they're really about STEM identity and about studying and thinking about scientists who come from really diverse backgrounds and finding your inspiration in those scientists. And then we also do readings around science and social justice. And then that community you start in your first year goes into your second year. Geneva is someone that's worked with the sophomore STEM scholars. And in that year, you work a lot on building some of your STEM skills, thinking about major choice, career planning. And then finally, actually for the first time this year, our junior and senior former STEM scholars are, they've become peer mentors. We call it mentoring triangles. So juniors and seniors have a first and second year STEM scholar, and they make it a mentoring community, which has been really great, especially during COVID, so that our first year students have been able to make connections with second, third, and fourth year students in STEM and get the advice they need for, classes to sign up for, how to access research, all those kinds of things.
Excellent. And we had a question from Lucy, if you don't mind. Should committed students apply to STEM Scholars now, or when would students apply to that?
I am pretty sure that the application is live. I hope I'm telling the truth. But it's we do have it. If you just Google Bates STEM Scholars, you should be able to find the application there, and it's open for at least the month of May.
Excellent. And it looks like Joey already put in the link. Booyah. Awesome. Kind of continuing in this vein, if you don't mind, we have a question. What opportunities are there to find the intersection of math and social justice? And kind of extending that, what are the intersections of social justice and STEM in your fields?
Yeah, I was starting to type this, but this will be easier. Yeah, we actually have a brand new class that's being offered right now on math and social justice. It used to be one of our short-term courses taught by someone different who retired, and it's now been revived and it's being taught now currently. So that's exciting. And I would say that, so that's a course it's dedicated to it, but that those topics come up in a lot of our other courses through readings and project opportunities. I don't know that we can really call them case studies in math like folks were talking about, but I would say that it's something similar to that, where we have specific examples that we're talking about. Yeah, I would say that there are a lot of opportunities to discuss that through the math department, and especially if you focus on a few specific courses, that's the easiest one to point to. Then you can make sure to see those topics in classes. But yeah, a lot of our faculty discuss those issues through many courses as well. So it kind of weaves its way through.
Speaking just for DCS, it's sort of a core premise of ours that you can't understand computers, computing, programming, AI, machine learning in the world without understanding how power operates. And so I think almost all of our classes are asking questions about not just, can I do this thing, but should I? Is there a deep and violent history that I should attend to here? How do I build better digital and computational systems that are doing good work and not replicating harm? Which I think is pretty exciting about DCS, and pretty uncommon to have it fully interwoven in a computing curriculum.
And I might just add that in addition to having quite a few courses in STEM that really engaged you with thinking about issues around social justice, I would say that the professors and the faculty and staff in STEM, we've been working really hard over the last several years to bring more inclusive pedagogies to our classes too. And by that, I mean, we're really trying to create a learning environment where no matter what background you come from or place you come from, that you see yourself at Bates, and that you gain a sense of belonging and feel like it's a place that's there to support you. And so the faculty have been doing a lot of development of their own teaching to really make sure that we learn about students' lived experiences, and that we're attuned to your backgrounds and your cultures and the things that are really important to you, so that we can specifically support you as an individual in your journey in STEM so that you can be successful.
Awesome. So we don't have any more open questions, but we have about 10 more minutes. So definitely, if you have any lingering questions, please put those in the Q&A. Anything we don't get to, we'll respond after this session. But I'd love to ask folks about the new Science Center, the Bonnie Science Center, that has been coming up on campus over the course of, has it been like 2 years? What is time anymore? It's been a few years. We're really excited for it. It's coming to fruition. But what are you guys excited about this new science facility? There's going to be tons of lab space, student space. What are you looking forward to?
I was saying before this call that I really hadn't seen a layout of the Bonnie Science Center until I was in a meeting today, where Bates was raising some money for naming classrooms in this building, and I saw a rendering of like a student living room space, and that made me so excited, because the idea of having like awesome spaces where students in STEM can be in class, and sometimes when you're in lab, you might have a few breaks, and it's really nice to be able to have a space to go to and work problems together or study together. And so I just saw the most beautiful like open rooms for students to study in, and that made me feel kind of excited.
I'm very excited about the new shared lab spaces, and then the types of facilities that we're going to get. I'm really excited to be moving into the new building, because there's an entire aspect of my research that has been dependent on getting into the new building and the new facilities that we have. And so I think that, like April said, like the spaces we're going to have to work with students, the types of the things that we're going to be able to do. And I do think that sort of having more departments together in that space, people from biology, neuroscience, chemistry, sort of just across the board, we're going to have that. And I know in Carnegie that there has been many STEM departments getting to be together. I'm really looking forward to, Dana right now has been just chemistry and biochemistry. And so I'm really excited about getting to actually share physical space with colleagues from multiple departments, and getting to see like what kind of really cool questions that enables us to ask, and ways that we get to interact and support students in that space.
Excellent. And I think, okay, we're answering those other questions. Perfect. So since we're kind of coming to the close here, I'd love to maybe close out just with some general advice for students wherever they land. If students are interested in pursuing STEM, do you have any advice for them?
I guess if you're interested in STEM, there are people that are excited about that and that want to support you. And if you are unsure about things and you have questions, the best thing you can do is go ask. Faculty, other students. In general, I think Bates is a really supporting place. And the other thing that I try to really remind my first year students frequently is that like, I really, really want to help you. And every faculty member does, but it's super hard sometimes to know who needs help. And so sometimes the best thing you can do is go to office hours. Office hours sound like faculty are working in their office and you shouldn't interrupt them. But really, that time is set aside where we want you to come hang out in our office and ask us questions. And so the best thing you can do is ask for help early, ask for help often, and realize that there are tons of support structures at Bates that are set up to make sure that you get to succeed, and that you have access to the help and resources that you need to succeed. And I think anybody who stopped on campus, if you like ask for something, I think people are generally like really generous with their time and support and help. And we want to make sure that we get you the help and support that you need to thrive and feel like you belong at Bates and in STEM in general.
And I would just extend what Colleen said. I agree with all of it. And I would say that it's not even like just ask for help or anything, but just reach out and get to know people and talk with people. Stop by and say hi to your professors. I think a lot of advice that students get or help or suggestions or things that make things a little easier for them to work through end up by happenstance. It's just sort of, they happen to be having a conversation and they'll say something and the professor might say, oh, you might take this course next instead of that one because it fits better with what you're trying to do. Or, oh, you know what, there's this great research opportunity I just learned about. It sounds like a perfect fit. Let me make sure you have the link. And so much of that is just by chatting with people. And then they think of you when they know of opportunities because they know what you're interested in and what you're trying to do next. So that part about kind of just go talk to people is true, even if you don't think you have a question, because there might be things that other people know. It might be other students, it might be professors that can help you. You might be just talking about picking courses and some other student will say, oh, I took this course that would be really great. You might enjoy it. Or this one seems like a good fit with what you're trying to study next. I'm sure there's lots of other advice that just, or ideas that come up just from those conversations. And people are usually really excited to offer suggestions or work together on projects. And so just chat, just talk with folks.
Excellent advice. And I guess we'll close this out with, we do have one last question, which I think is a great one. How stressed are STEM students typically? And if I could just maybe make this a leading question, how would you describe the academic culture at Bates? Collaborative, competitive? How do students manage their stress?
I was just starting to type this in the chat, and I was going to say that I'm not going to lie. Like there's some semesters that are that can be a heavier load than others, but the students aren't bearing this alone. If there's a physics major, there's one semester typically where they're taking, a heavy lab class and a heavy theory class, and there's a lot of work. But there's a cohort of 10, 15 other students doing the same thing, and they've been working together for a couple of years. They know which students they study better with. They know who they can ask about programming oriented questions. They know who they can ask about more lab oriented questions. So it's a shared burden, and it's kind of a neat phenomenon to see, because when I was in college as an undergrad, I didn't have that kind of atmosphere. I was sort of maybe one or two other people that I hung out with, but I felt like it was just us against the world. And with the physics majors at Bates, and I think the STEM students in general, I see them reaching out tendrils and having multiple sources of support among other majors, other students in STEM, their friends who are not in STEM, but they live with, all to kind of pull them through these harder moments in the arc of a STEM major's career.
And I would add that we have some great resources as well. I was just talking to a student today who was telling me how helpful the math stats workshop is for her. That's something that we have at Bates that students can go to get help, like with strategic ways to solve problems. And we also have a lot of peer mentors that help with our, STEM classes, and certainly in chemistry and in biology. In our academic resource commons. And so those are some other places that students go and get really great support. I would agree with Nathan that, right, sometimes I would venture you won't find a STEM anywhere, any college, where you won't find some stress among STEM students. I was talking to a student this morning who said to me, she said, oh, we were so stressed in Gen Chem last year. And it's just, well, now I feel like I know everyone. And so we know how to study together. And, and so she sort of was looking back saying like, why were we stressed? And I just said, well, because that's sort of the nature of a lot of college, really. I mean, you sometimes get really stressed about different parts, but I would say that overall, I find the Bates community, and by that I mean, certainly the faculty are very helpful, but I find the students to be really helpful to each other at Bates.
I guess
Add that I've been at campuses where students are super competitive with each other, and Bates is extremely collaborative. I would absolutely describe that as a sort of description of the campus as a whole and the students as a group, and that characterizes the work here. So there are some students who it's kind of in their nature, they have to be competitive. That doesn't work as well unless you can also like work with each other. So you can have that sort of competition with yourself, but it's not really directed at other people. Like with each other, folks are working together, helping each other out.
I think a thing that characterizes all of the departments represented here is that we also ask students to really think about how they learn and think metacognitively. And that I think is not necessarily, it's certainly not something that I was taught when I was in college. And I think it really does help with stress because students are better able to think about like, what is the thing that's stressing me out here? The fact that I'm in college in a chemistry class, or is it a particular kind of learning? Or is it that I've just had like a really stressful week? And so I've learned a lot from my colleagues in this space about helping students to think metacognitively. And I think it has made it better for all students.
And I guess I just want to like add to that, the point of life is not to ever not be stressed. And no matter what your college major is, you're going to have stressful days. Even if you decide not to major in STEM, like STEM is not the stressful thing. It turns out uncertainty, kind of being pushed to expand your knowledge and think in new ways and to grow is a stressful experience. And so I think that kind of coming back to what Meredith and April and Nathan have said about the idea here is that you're going to find and build systems and networks that help you manage and deal with stress. I can tell you, I have been super stressed out. I'm not in college anymore. I've got all the STEM degrees, and I have cried in April in Geneva's office over stress. And you know what? That's totally okay. And so it's okay to feel stressed out. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. And what that means is it's time to turn not to the inside and hide, but to turn outwards to your support network and do what Anelise is saying about like, well, what is the thing that's stressing me out? How do I work through this problem? And how do I build the skills to manage these feelings that are never actually going to go away? And you will still be stressed after you graduate from Bates and when you are on to the next amazing thing that you do. And so the goal is not to avoid stress. The goal is to develop skills to deal with stress and still be able to show up, be productive, and do the things that you need to do. And I think there's really great community aspects to the Bates culture here that helps kind of do that work and build a cohort that helps with that.
Well, I couldn't think of a better note to end this session on. Thank you so much for your advice, for your honesty. I'm sure students really appreciated it. I think we got to most questions, but students, if you have any follow-up questions, definitely feel free to reach out. I think Joey has already shared her email and I will share mine as well. Definitely let us know if you have any questions. But thank you for sticking with us for a whole hour. I know that's like a million years in Zoom time, especially in the evening or honestly morning, wherever you folks are. So we will kind of release you into the wild, but thank you again for joining us.